Right, welcome to the Founder Podcast. I'm Magnus Olson and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Justin Hodges and Mr. Benny Marr. Welcome, boys.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate, for having us.
Mate, today we got a very special guest, Mr. Clinton Hoffman, a serial entrepreneur with us today. How are you, Clint?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Magnus. Yourself, mate?
Mate, very, very well.
Enjoying your entourage here too. Big names.
Big names, mate. Big hitters.
The big boys in the house. So you built multiple businesses, Clint. What's the mindset shift required to go from a great idea to execution?
Yeah, I think that's the big question, isn't it? The multi-million-dollar question. For me, it was interesting. The first 10 years of my career, I was in the traditional chartered accounting field, working the majority of the time with Ernst & Young, and I was in forensic risk insolvency, so all risk. And so when I started our own accounting firm when I was 30-odd, and 24 years ago now, what I sort of realised was it took me about 5 years being in my own business to realise entrepreneur was a dirty word back then when we started our business early 2000s. You had Bondi, you had Scase, completely destroyed for us during the 80s, and then in the 90s and early 2000s, working in that risk insolvency sort of area, interest rates at 21%, winding up businesses, liquidating businesses, etc. Entrepreneurism was probably the Greek bloke running the restaurant down the street. Now everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. So for me, the first 5 years in my own business as a chartered accounting firm, I could not believe when I was working for the big four that someone might be late with their BAS, or someone might be robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's the metaphor. But for me, just that entering into entrepreneurism and knowing, understanding cash flow and dreams, you've got to have the cash flow and, to be able to even chase that dream. So for me, that action orientation, I've made a fortune by business planning and giving advice, etc. as a chartered accountant. I still have my chartered accounting firm, public practicing chartered accountant. So, let's do a business plan. Let's do this. Let's do that. But it's all money you're spending in the planning phase. Whereas if you look at the concepts of lean startup, which is less money on planning, more money on, spend that money on building a prototype, testing the market, getting immediate market feedback, but this action orientation as opposed to planning. Now, I've probably done myself out of a job, but, in terms of, for me, I've always said as an entrepreneur, I wake up every morning and I have a cash flow in my stomach and I have a SWOT analysis in my head. And it goes like that. And that gives me, my stomach just rumbled then. I wake up with an entrepreneur anxiety. It's as simple as that. I've done many a program at Harvard Business School and they say, no, Clint, that's the Harvard Business School fire in the belly. I'm like, no bullshit. That is entrepreneurial anxiety. That's the first thing, the last thing you think about before you go to bed and the first thing you wake up in the morning. SWOT analysis in the head and a cash flow in the stomach. And they're the two levers. Like, the best business plan in the world, you can, best IMs, I've had them all. But that's why you're forever balancing, and that action orientation, having a North Star, We've all been around the footy change rooms or the cricket change rooms or whatever, the pub, and we've got those blokes that are really good storytellers. They've got a million ideas. I've got a good bunch of mates back in the day down in Byron Bay. They've got this idea, they got that idea, they want to do this, they want to do that. But when it comes, push comes to shove, how are you going to start it? How are you going to take that idea from the dream to the actual reality and go, you know what, how do I get this started? How do I get this started? And for me, prototype. Build a prototype, test the market very quickly because we all fall in love with our dream. Oh, this is the best idea I've ever heard. Mate, over the last 10 years, I've had that many people present that much stuff to me and I'm just going, business is difficult. It's really difficult. It puts a big strain on you as the entrepreneur, the family around you, your friends. Everyone thinks it's easy. It's not. It's not. There's a reason 85% of businesses fail within 3 years. It's a big reason. So, I just think, back to the question, get action orientated, get out of the planning phase as quickly as possible, but use your SWOT, use your cash flow analysis. What's the opportunity? What's the cost? What's the risk? What's the benefit? But get market feedback as soon as you can.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I look at you and like you said, you've got that chartered accounting background and my wife's an accountant and I'm a little bit of the risk taker. So then you've actually wear both hats because you're an entrepreneur and you've got that part of your brain and that part of your mind that's wanting to take risk and wanting to explore opportunity, but then at the same time, you're struggling with this chartered mentality as well.
I used a term years ago before, and I do play in the mental health space as well, but years ago, a bipolar dichotomy. And I used it with a mate. And he said, "What are you calling me?" I said, bipolar dichotomy. And for me, it is that, left brain, right brain, where the spreadsheet is telling me no. And somewhere we can always get a spreadsheet that tells you you're going to make profit. But the spreadsheet I have will be, it doesn't lie. And then to say, well, yeah, but I'll spend a bit more, just a bit more development. I'll spend a bit more on dev, or I'll get this, or I'll get that. And, that money's coming from somewhere, friends, family, investors, your own pocket, selling houses, what have you. There's always something to spend money on.
Yep.
We've had this conversation, you might get some tech developers out there. They're always, hey, you want to, if you think building a house is difficult, try building an app or trying to get a tech solution, when you know nothing about it. I'm not a tech head, but good with the spreadsheet. But also, from my point of view, a lot of the stuff I've got involved with has been a real social impact. So it's been like, no, I want to do this. I'm passionate about it, which is passion this side and logic the other. There's a fair bit of, that little guy on the shoulder saying, really, do you have to spend that? Do you have to go this way? And because you need to spend money to make it. You've got to take risks. All that entrepreneurial sort of dialogue, looking in the mirror in the morning, I can do this, but what's the spreadsheet saying? So that's the dichotomy right there.
Well, if you're looking back at your long journey, what was probably one of the toughest lessons you had to learn the hard way?
Look, and I think I'm still learning it. I think I'm still learning. I'm a bit of a dreamer. My mum's a Ukrainian immigrant, Second World War, came out after the war, and her mum was in war camps, so lost her first husband and two sons in the war. And so for me, I just look at her, and she came to Australia, highly qualified woman in the health space, and then couldn't speak English, couldn't read and write. Classic immigrant story. We were white wogs. The Italians were the black wogs, and my beautiful wife, the lovely Aboriginal Martina Hazelbane. She's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen on the planet. But we all know the names they were called back in the day. So we're in a very. But what that immigrant story does is that when you've come from nothing, and you're not employable, you've got to think of a way to earn a dollar. The Greek fish and chip shops on every corner years ago. It's the Chinese, it's amazing that immigrant equals entrepreneurial story. So back to your question, the lessons I've learned, I've sort of always had a bit of a social justice, and I want to make change. So for me, it's been a 7 to 8 year journey with one of my startups called Driveabout, which to me just made complete sense, and it still does to me, where up in the Northern Territory, if an Aboriginal traditional owner or a First Nations person from out in Kalkaringi cannot access the road rule handbook, and if they do, they can't read and write in English, and they don't get their driver's licence, and the poor bugger decides to drive old grandma to the shops and gets pulled over by the footy coach who's the copper of the local area, but he's in an unregistered car and it's unroadworthy, you're starting to get enough, criminality to be in jail for 12 weeks.
Yeah.
So for me, that's what I said, what? I can change this. I grew up in Gove, in Arnhem Land. I can change this for the Yolngu mob I grew up with. Mate, it's the year 2017. Surely I can build an app. I can actually, with my educational team, we can rip that road rule handbook apart. We can look at the competencies we're teaching about how to go around a roundabout or whatever it is. We can animate it with instructional animation, so it's the real deal. And I can put in 8 Aboriginal languages and then English. And then it's now in 7 foreign languages. The last one was Ukrainian that we did when the new war immigrants were coming over to Australia. But back to your question, the lesson I learned the hard way, in particular with this, is that it's disruptive. So what are the different government agencies around Australia? We have a what's called a federated model when it comes to driver's licensing. We've got all different states and territories, even though that traditional owner in Arakoon's facing the same problem as that TO in Kakkering in the territory. There's no harmonisation of our driver's licence system. So for me, where I struggled here, and it took me a while to work out, because I think I'm right on the good, fighting the good fight, winning Australian awards, etc., really enjoying what I do. But you're displacing someone's job, or someone thinks their job's being displaced within the bureaucracy. I actually recently wrote a paper on disruptive innovation. So why isn't DriveAbout being adopted by my Northern Territory government? Why? Well, there's a number of jobs that are in a certain government department that issue Aboriginal licensing. They might be in fear of losing their job, which I'm sure they won't, because this app makes their job a lot easier when you're actually got an Aboriginal language. Secondly, they've got a 10-year supply of the books that no one's reading. Thirdly, the legislation says that you just need to pass a test. It doesn't say you need to know the road rules. You just need to pass the test. So I suppose what I learned the hard way is great idea. It's amazing. I'm at Harvard Business School showing people, and they love it. Whoever I show it to absolutely loves it. It was probably 5 to 10 years before its time, and I'm hoping the time's now. But the thing I learned the hard way is that when you're disrupting something, you think it's the solution to a problem. But unless people think there's a problem to start with, it's really tough to get that product market fit.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that's and I haven't given up on it, Justin. And it's a bloody good product. We're pivoting. We're doing a whole heap of stuff in that space. But geez, just beware when the emotions and the passion take over.
Always.
So how do you know when to pivot versus when to persist with an idea? I know we just sort of touched on that briefly, but you talked about you're not done with that idea. I guess from my perspective, being in the education space as well, what makes you so passionate to maybe go back to that idea?
Yep.
And and two, how do you know it's the right thing to do?
Yeah,
when is the right time to do it?
No, just a great question, and especially in that innovation space, because innovation is this lovely word. It's entrepreneurism, it's innovative, all chucked around. However, if you're bringing something out well before the market's ready for it, you could die on the vine. You'll go broke waiting for the market to catch up. I've been very lucky, or not lucky. You make your own luck. I've got a chartered accounting firm. So profits over the years. I wasn't married, no kids for many, many years. And I was able to look at investing the profits from my consulting practice back into the development of, in this case, what's now called EdTech, because I thought the main space that was changing was education. Education hasn't changed for 300 years, but now, COVID especially just changed the game with education, online learning, developing content, etc. But back to that pivot, just what happened with us just before COVID hit. If I had my time again, I probably would have put it in Mandarin Chinese before the Aboriginal languages, because I got basically pigeonholed as the bloke from Darwin with an Aboriginal road safety app. No, the reason I built it was there's 600,000 kids every year get their driver's licence. And from our research, not too many read the book. They practice the test online. How's that going to go for you? We've got 3.5 to 4 road deaths a day in Australia. I'm saying probably not understanding the road rules and the road safety principles, how to overtake a 4-carriage road train on the Bruce Highway or the Stewart Highway. That's where I was very passionate about changing. So I knew 600,000 mainstream kids in Australia aren't reading the book, so we can educate them better. But because I put in the Aboriginal languages, I just got typecast to the bloke from Darwin with this great app that's in Aboriginal languages. So just before COVID, we joint ventured with the South Australian Government and the Australian Migrant Resource Centre, and we put it in 5 foreign languages, one of them being Mandarin. At the same time, I was with Austrade on a trade mission in China, where we were talking to the Chinese government and about the 800,000 Chinese university students in Australia, which as Australian government we've got a duty of care to them, and we're hoping they're going to be safe when they're in Australia. So what about a great sort of diplomatic Austrade sort of led venture where all those Chinese students through the universities, associations, etc., are given DriveAbout. So we're sitting pretty. we're starting to go. And we've won Australian national awards, and next thing COVID hits, right? What happened to the Chinese market? Disappeared overnight. International tourism disappeared overnight. I was on 3PR, I think, or 4PR in Perth, the biggest radio station, after, sadly, a couple of Chinese tourists died on their highway, and interviewed for 10 minutes on the fact that we've got in Mandarin and China Air or Qantas, as they're bringing over, why don't we have it on the in-flight? And then when you hire your Avis car, why don't you actually show that you've gone through the test? And at least, because we're driving on the other side of the road, let's make sure the tourists have a bit of it. So that all happened, COVID hit. And I'm like, wow. I couldn't fly to Perth. I was talking to the Automobile Association of RAA in WA, or RAC. So the true pivot is I just went, do we give up on this? No one knew what was going on in COVID. But I thought, you know what? I reckon when everything gets lifted, I reckon road safety statistics are going to go even worse. Everyone's going to hit back the road. There's going to be people camping, doing this, doing that. So I thought, what's my core asset here? It's not the app. It's the content. Instructional animation, as you would know, $450 a second from go to O. But you build it once, you build it well. We've got millions of dollars worth of content. So I thought the other thing is industrial manslaughter laws came along, which is a business owner, you can be held criminally accountable if there's a death in the workplace. And the biggest killer in the Australian workplace is a road crash. So I thought, I've got some really good digital content. Why don't I take the learner stuff out of that content? Why don't I actually create a work health safety? And we created Drive Belt Workforce, and we put on an LMS, and we've now got corporate clients using it because they're demonstrating their duty of care to their employees. So we've pivoted from being basically pigeonholed as an Aboriginal app to going, what's our true asset? Well, it's the content that sits on the app. Well, wow, there's no road rule, road safety refreshers in the Australian workplace. Just need BHP and Rio Tinto to jump on board, and we are game on. So we pivoted into that space. And then the other pivot we did, and I explained to my investors, I've got some high net wealth friends who invested in, once we're in the App Store, and I explained to them that I haven't got $3 million to pay Justin Hodges and, to get out there and get on TV and say, hey, kids, download this. It's the best thing since sliced bread. So it was interesting. I sort of got this great app, but how do I get it to market? And then one day there's 3M who make our Post-it notes. But 3M also have patented materials that they build all the street signs with. Great mate of mine owns Work Zone in South Australia, and he bought the license to 3M printing for the street signs, so he could, biggest road working business there, that he could, basically get more profitability to his business. And one day I'm walking through his factory with him, and I think the Transport Minister for South Australia, and I see this magnetic 3M material. I just thought, I know that our LMP plates sold in our local servos are made in China, Taiwan, or what have you. And I thought, hang on, can we pivot here? Can we look at getting into manufacturing L&P plates? So what we did, we got a great made in Australia on Kuna Country, and it's L's and P's with a QR code on that L&P plate to our app. The only one in the world, the only one in Australia, etc. So we're just in the midst of it now. So you go hopefully to an Ampol or an Officeworks and you buy your L plate, Dad and Mum buys it, and all of a sudden you're QR coding directly to our free app, to our 2.5 hours of road rule, road safety content. And Magnus, you were involved in, and when we got Casper and his son Ed Kaspovich, a nudgy rugby boy, who's now crossed the line. I think he's going over and playing union in New South Wales. But we had Casper and his son. We filmed a 2 minutes worth of filming, so 2-minute ads of Casper and his son throwing the LMP plate over their shoulder, the plastic ones made in wherever, and chucking the road rule book over their shoulder, and then basically downloading this app. And Casper saying, mate, this helps me because we know the only time a parent ever looks at the road rules, road safety is when their kid's going for their licence. And Ed's going, mate, I love this. I'm actually watching animation and it's brilliant. So a couple of, hopefully I haven't talked too much on that, but we had the content and we pivoted. So I didn't give up. in COVID. I thought, no, this still has to get in the hands of kids or employees in the workplace. So
That's a great little pivot. One thing I just thought of is when you look at, and I know in my life and I know you, Justin, when you're playing footy, you learn more from a loss than what you do a win. So what's one of the biggest failures you can share with our audience, and what were some of the lessons that you learned from that?
Look, I think luck should never play a part, but I've had a couple of things that I've been unlucky to occur, and I suppose COVID for a lot of businesses was one of those things.
Yes.
I've done 1 million business plans for clients over the years. Never as a threat in my SWOT analysis did I have pandemic. So that's how big that issue was. But some of my learnings is around governance in a startup. So some of my real guilt, and my good Ukrainian Catholic guilt, I was brought up very well by my mum, but, imposter syndrome's alive and well, especially when you're an entrepreneur, when you're trying to build something. At least as a chartered accountant, I've got my formal quals, I've got my time at Stanford, Harvard, etc. But as an entrepreneur, are you faking it till you're making it? Have I just told you guys a story about these fantastic LMP plates or what? So one of my toughest things is with that, basically other people's money, whereas I've been lucky enough to, retain very strong majority shares in my companies, but I have used other people's money to try and get a ramp to, we're going the right way just before COVID. And for me, especially when they're friends and they're high net wealth and they're smart guys. So for me, the toughest thing, the ones I feel that I've learned from is, am I doing the right thing by my investors? They took a punt. It's a startup. There's no, it's not a government bond, but still my stay awake issues at night. Am I doing the best I can? And am I, doing the best thing on behalf of my investors? And for me, at different times, there's been prickly investor relations. It's just the way it is, human nature. People have different expectations. But for me, I've had to, if I have those prickly conversations with investors, I actually have to just get out of myself, out of my own ego, and say, what am I being taught here? This investor might just be, he's got me by the short and curlies for a bit, and he's really sort of, wants this and that. He's burning time. So, mate, I could be spending it on this. I need to be over here. But it's no, what are you learning from this? So, playing in the governance space and business advisory is I really, down the track, want to work with, that startup investor, that young entrepreneur that knows everything, but work around that governance for an entrepreneur, because I don't find too many textbooks on it. And it's a really that's my biggest areas of learning at the moment for a guy who's supposed to have a couple of quals, is that's lived experience learning. I'm not reading that in too many Harvard textbooks. They're actually explaining that investor entrepreneur relationship.
I think as an expert in technology, where do you see the biggest opportunities in education in terms of technology right now?
Yeah, it's over the weekend I just played with developing an AI twin.
Yes.
Some great Facebook advertising, because I'm at 54. I've basically come up with a concept of GI meets AI, the grey intelligence. Hopefully there's some
Red,
works with works already. Yeah. RI, AI, yeah.
Just throwing ideas out there.
Yeah, but just that grey. So I've really embraced AI over the last couple of years. Really, rather than fear it, I'm lean, mean as a business. I can embrace it, and for me, just say some of the AI out there. When I was at EY, we used to have a research team that would come up with a number of questions we needed answered. We might be working on the Qantas audit. We might need some industry information. We would basically then send off that information to our data room, our researchers. Take a couple of weeks and you'd get it back. But you're only as good as the question that you asked or what you framed. Okay, garbage in, garbage out. So I'm seeing AI, is just absolutely phenomenal. What's happening out there in that tech space, especially in this education space as well. But what I think it's this grey, so me trying to proof myself and go, what value have I got in 5 or 10 years? Well, it's that grey intelligence where I've been burnt a few times or I've seen clients go this way or that way, but also using the power of this, the AI third industrial revolution or the technology revolution we're going through. So for me, where I'm seeing it, this year is when we developed the IF project and the IF guide, we spent a week in the film studio basically coming up with about 80 really highly professionally shot videos of my therapist, Barry Hogg, to basically build a digital ebook and an app for men, just giving 3-minute sort of content. Now, it was Barry's first time in front of camera. He was 65. He's brilliant, and he did remarkably well. But I reckon it cost me about 50 grand, okay, back then, getting the content, getting it edited, getting it cut up. And that's not Barry's time, that's not my time. It was just an expensive exercise. So on the weekend I was playing around. We're working with a good mate of mine looking at a concept around the spirit of football, AFL, aerial ping pong. But what I've basically done is I've just basically now, with the team tomorrow, I've got these 40-second scripts that I've got this pretty ordinary looking AI twin, Hoff 2, but
Nice.
it's got a bit of interesting accent. I think it's a bit of Jack Thompson, bit of Magnus.
You've created that.
Yeah. So, and what's interesting, it didn't take me long to create. And we're using
So it's like a little Hoff avatar.
Yep, correct. And it's better looking, but it's if I played this to some people in America who didn't know me, they would not pick up the difference. If it's an AI generated Hoff. Yeah. That Seinfeld series where you get in a bit of trouble for speaking yourself in third person, or me. And so
here all the time.
Did you use a little bit of Bob Hawke?
There's a little bit of Bob there, a little bit of Bob. But the great thing with this is I've now got 40-second content. So I went back through, and I think having this podcast is great because it gives you some time to spend on your business, which as entrepreneurs we're always stuck in it, aren't we? So over the weekend and the preceding sort of week or two, I've just looked at my 16 great projects I've done in the 25 years of being in my consulting firm, because there's some really good stuff there, even if I do say myself. So I've basically got a little 1.5 page case study on each. But then what I did is I broke that down to a 40-second script. Now, for those 16 projects, I'm going to put that 40-second script, and it takes about 7 minutes with the rendering, etc. So 7 minutes times 16, let me get this right, 70, about 106 minutes it's going to take me and my team to put that script in, but have 16 40-second videos explain these projects. Now, how much would that cost me in a film studio? And yeah, I can tell it's not me. All my mates in Darwin, the footy club, were just going, "Oh, footy, mate, you're the first guy to get good on you." But in terms of when we're trying to get that content, and back to your question, this is the type of stuff that's happening. My daughter, she's I call her my deadly daughter. So her father's a genius DJ back in the day, and her mum's a superstar. So she's got that creative genius, an Aboriginal warrior woman mother, and DJ creative father. And I see the beautiful things of both in her, but her in this current education system that was developed back in the 1800s or the 1700s. She is that good with tech now and that creative. Is she? I need to employ her in about a year's time. So I think that's what's happening with our, and especially with our, a lot of mob I do work with up north, Aboriginal health, etc. Is I can train that old elder to be his twin, right? Obviously, involve him, remunerate him properly, all that type of stuff. But I can have. I'm a type 2 diabetic. I've got some really good stuff on my diabetes journey as a white fella, but I can have old man tell that white fella diabetes story, and talk about, I got this white mate called Clint, and he got his diabetes through chronic stress. And so what he does now, but mate, we're just putting that through this AI avatar. And all of a sudden we're getting culturally appropriate, scalable education, because, Christ, we need it. we need it. So I think, and you're in the education system as well, the expense of content, it's expensive. And I think what I've done is I've made sure that I've got the right frameworks to deliver that content, because I think there's going to be a lot of AI cowboys out there. But in my profession, everyone's profession.
Sure.
And it's a bit like, are you going to play footy on steroids, or are you going to have your natural ability and play to your technical and expertise? So for me, the other thing is getting the right frameworks to deliver the content from. And I think that's what you've seen in our work, Magnus, be it a mental health program where we're based on a poem, 12 lines of a poem, and then build out the content from there. So I think there's going to be this flood of extra content that's going to drive a lot of people crazy. But if it's connected to the right GUI or general user interface and the learning management systems, we're going to get huge advancements in that. And I think that just that final point, just to close out, is I want to hear health stories from someone who's been through it. Like my last 5 years of type 2 diabetes, when I was just absolutely in shock that I got it, but working with my clinical psych, she said, Clint, a lot of my PTSD patients get type 2 diabetes, cortisol, stress. I've now got a little 45-second explanation with my Hoff twin that explains the interaction between fight and fright response, cortisol, your pancreas flooding your body with glucose, it overriding insulin, and suddenly you're in trouble. Now, I've never had that explained to me, but that's the sort of stuff we can get quickly out to people who know. So
what's the most underrated, skill? Like obviously we've talked a lot about specific stuff around ed tech and AI and all that sort of stuff. As a founder, or if someone's listening to this show and they're a founder themselves or they're entrepreneurial, what's one of the most important skills you think they need to succeed?
Yeah, this is one I've learned the hard way, or just life teaches you. That old adage, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. And for me, that underrated skill of actually really listening and constructively listening, which is a tough one, right? Because when you've got your North Star and you're telling the government, no, animation in Aboriginal language is the way forward, but just probably being a bit more sensitive to what are the barriers for that product getting up.
Barriers to success,
if that makes sense. So the other one is just, ego in the right quantities is not a dirty word. Getting out of yourself sometimes. And number 3, the most underrated skill is surrounding yourself with people who can say no to you or challenge you. So I've had some really, I call them black hats, and big call out to exactly who I'm speaking of. There's a few of them who have had to deal with me in my manic entrepreneurial, this is what we're going to do, guys, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and they've basically had the ability to say, I don't think that's going to work. And then they've been able to communicate their fears or their logic behind it. But just having that, I think they're the underrated skills, surrounding yourself by those people who still believe in you but can challenge you. But then you've got to listen to them. And, there's probably a couple of times where I haven't enough.
Yep. Fantastic.
So if you were going to do a new, just for the wannabe entrepreneurs out there, if you were going to do a new little startup company tomorrow, what's the first thing that you'd do?
I think I'm too old. I think I've burnt myself out. Look, the first thing I'd do is understand how difficult business is, just to start with. That's I try and talk people out of going to business. Like I've got an animation. It's gone viral, the 10 reasons businesses fail. I encourage them, it's about an ice cream shop, and I encourage them to watch it 10 times, please, 10 times. And you're going to realise it's not about the ice cream shop. It's about the fundamental learnings. Now, I'll probably go home and watch that tonight for the first time in 6 months, and I'll get learnings out of it, So, but back to your question, I think...
just on that, Clint, have you got a link or something like that we can attach to the show notes that can take people to
that?
Yeah,
I'm pretty free with my IP. So www.ambrosesolutions.com.au, and we've got a link to that. We've got a link to a really good one we've done with board governance, the 10 reasons boards fail. but you'll get some pretty cool stuff on
Perfect,
that
mate.
on
Thank you.
Ambrose Solutions. So yeah,
Awesome.
that's no worries. But I think, go back to that. Get it produced very quickly. Get it to market. Get it tested. So I'm working with a mate at the moment, helping him out of one of the Nelson twins who's been on this show before, and we're working on a top secret project at the moment. But what we're doing is just keeping it undercover. But we're going to get a prototype out using AI twins. So there'll be a third Nelson twin, not just two.
I look forward to that.
I think that, but the big one I suppose I've learned the hard way is just your own health. Your health is at 54, married to a woman just a couple of years younger than me. She looks about 20 years younger. When she goes and gets her nails done by the lovely Filipino ladies, and they see a photo of me, they think I'm her sugar daddy and 20 years older. So, but just I think where it's going now with wearables, health tech, etc. I think investors are going to be asking a lot more questions around how the entrepreneur is from a health point of view. Have they got their fitness under control? Have they got the relationships under control? Have they got this under control? Because I think now we can get the data if it's not. So, I'm wearing the Aura ring. I've got the 24 glucose monitor, and it's really teaching me things about staying, when my sugar levels are high, I'm that kid on
That's
red
probably
cordial.
a really good subject, actually, that I don't think it's touched on enough, is it? That whatever industry you choose to go into, whether it be you're working for someone or you're an entrepreneur, but just how you need to have a real focus on your health, and the healthier and fitter you are, the stronger you're going to be to fight.
Yep. Is this when we introduce your the book coming out?
Not just yet. It's still under wraps.
Yeah, beautiful. Another
Benny's
top
helped me with
secret.
it. Yeah,
Another top secret
absolutely.
project.
Is it? Mate, like obviously we're talking about a lot of stuff that you do yourself, but how important is it to have a strong team?
Oh.
Obviously, when you're starting from scratch, or even to where you are today.
Yeah, look, 15 years ago, I had probably 20 employees, up to 30. I left Ernst & Young because I had, I felt like I had 30 clients and 30 staff, and none of them were getting the best out of me. But I think now I've gone for, collaboration's a huge thing. So I've got a great animation company I work with and I'm involved with. I've got good subcontractors that can, in and out when you need them, etc. But the good team, I would not be, man, I'm not an app developer. I'm not an animator. I'm not a content creator. I was the guy, we had 76 people work on DriveAbout to get it into the App Store from start to finish. And I was that bloke who was going, guys, it's easy. All we're doing is animating the road rule handbook, right? We're making sure it's competency-based. We'll get it signed off by government. We're going to put it on an app, and we're going to have a multi-choice test at the end of it. And I drove my team crazy. And a really good part of this, for that real 6-month dev cycle, I was off the grog as well. I had really clear mind, so my comms were good. 24 hours a day I was on the clock because our developers were in South Africa. Okay, so, but I was just in the best frame, but the team, because you've got to communicate with your team, and that's knowing yourself. But the team, I couldn't have built it without them.
Yeah.
Just phenomenal. And then the amount of people that have just, I probably don't thank my team or acknowledge them enough historically. When I see them, I do. But I've just had some magnificent people work with me, for me. Organisation I'm still working with now. You get it. You're a team man.
Yep. Amazing.
So what are the 3 non-negotiable habits that every entrepreneur should develop?
Wow, good question. Belief in everything you do. I think discipline. Do what you say what you do. I think that's a real big sign. Authenticity, those times when I've felt like an imposter, an absolute imposter, and, are you a Christopher Skase? Are you a Bondi? That when you're in your shadow, just belief in yourself, be authentic as possible. And I just think that's non-negotiable. And build something the market wants
Yep.
and needs.
True.
Quick fire questions.
Oh, here we go.
You ready?
Yep.
Before we do any other comments, boys?
No,
Any other
no, I was actually quite intrigued by like the stuff that you did, like you said, like taking something from a booklet and turn into somewhere where, especially with Indigenous people, obviously it's not their first language.
Yep.
And to turn into language where, as you know, a lot of language has always been lost. So
Yes. Yep.
yeah, to do that, it's a lot of patience, a lot of pressure as well, obviously from the TOs and all that type
Yeah.
of stuff up there. So, you know, I take my hat off to you to do that. That's
No,
awesome.
Justin, that means it means a lot. And there's a photo when you go on the website. It's me standing on a beach in Arnhem Land in I think 1975, and I'm allowed to show it. A couple of the young kids with me have passed away, but that's the Yothu Indie country, So, but growing up, it's a real North Star. And I'm sitting there, I'm holding something in my hand, and when I do public speaking or chuck it up, I say I'm actually holding a mobile phone. I'm telling my Yolngal mates, hey, you know what? We're going to go full circle, and it's okay to be educated in your language, And the biggest respect you can give to anyone in the world is teach them in their first language. Yep. And as Australians, it's highly politicised, it's highly divisive at the moment. But my Italian mate, when he married my Aussie mate that married his beautiful Italian wife, and we gate crashed his wedding in Italy, when they had their first daughter, Gracie, the mother in Australia educated her first in Italian, in the mother's tongue, and then English follows. And bilingual education, so not making a shame job, I had government officials, I won't mention which state, one day told me, no, they can learn to speak English. And I'm like, is 1952 calling? Yeah. No, it is 2025. You can't AI Yolngal Matha yet. You can't AI Walpri yet. You can AI German. We're getting it about 70% right. But as you said, language preservation is a big thing. I work with a lot of native title groups in my day job of a chartered accountant in Queensland, and just the difficulties of lost language and how proud people are when they got their language and culture. Mate, I don't speak Ukrainian. I was looking forward to taking my mum to the Ukraine prior to the war breaking out to see my heritage and roots. I'm essentially displaced generation, and knowing your roots, knowing your culture, knowing your language. And the final bit on that, when I was up in Arnhem Land, and Yalmay Marika, who's a beautiful woman. She was married to the lead singer of Yothu Yindi, who sadly passed away. But she's a big, big advocate for bilingual education, and Newcastle School does it very well. But she had tears in her eyes when she saw it in Yolngal Matha, and she just hugged me, and they call me Billich Billich or Let's that way, which is a blue and yellow parrot that squawks a lot. But
that's good, mate.
Yeah, that's when you're on the, you're
doing
on
something right.
Exactly. So no, thanks for picking up on that.
Well done, mate.
Right, Benny, closing comments.
Mate, what's been the most exciting project you've worked on, and then what's the most upcoming project? What's the biggest upcoming project that you've got?
Yep.
That has you the most excited?
Yep. Drybout has just had me excited from day one. We've got we believe we've developed the first governance app on the planet, and so you've got 1 million volunteer sports directors or committee members sitting on sporting clubs around Australia. That's 1 million. They're mums and dads who have no governance or limited governance capability or education. They're not going to pay $10,000 to go to the AICD course. They'd be $2,000 to do the sports directors course, etc. So we brought it out a while back. I joint venture with Jenny Robinson, Australia's leading governance expert. So the great news is this is the most you're going to have to listen to me, because a lot of our apps that we build, we use technical experts. So Australia's leading governance advisor, explaining governance principles to mum and dad sitting on sporting clubs, not-for-profits or Aboriginal boards. That really excites me, because when I introduced her, I said it's just like my mum when she used to sit on sports club boards. She doesn't know governance. She hasn't been to Harvard. She didn't have degrees, but my mum's there volunteering her time to sit on that little sporting club board, and the sports club wouldn't be around without her. So that's a really exciting one. But there's more. So Yeah, no, it's a good space to work in, and education's a, you know, as you know, it gives you a payback that's not bottom line.
100%.
Exciting stuff. Let's crack on. Quick fire.
Here we go.
What's one book that changed how you think about business?
The Tipping Point.
Describe your entrepreneurial journey in 3 words.
4-wheel drive.
What's a business idea that you never pursued but still believe in?
I reckon I came up with the idea for spring-loaded chopsticks when I was about 7, and I was in a restaurant in China a couple of years ago, and I saw them.
You might be onto something.
So there's that one that someone else is always thinking about what you're thinking, especially there's a couple of billion up there, isn't there?
Yeah, if you had to start a company in a completely different industry, what would that be?
Wow. I think health and fitness.
What's your personal definition of success?
Dying with 1 million stories and not $1 million bucks? No, that can't be. I just think making societal change for the better.
What's the best business advice you ignored?
Ignored it at different points and probably still do. Stop chasing shiny things.
If you could have dinner with any entrepreneur, dead or alive, who would that be?
Wow, I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time with AJ Hackett. And, geez, what a legend. But I just think Richard Branson, similar sort of character.
What's one piece of software or tool that you can't live without in business?
At the moment, it's ChatGPT.
What's the weirdest or most unconventional business lesson you've learned?
Weirdest and most unconventional business lesson? Oh, I think it's not weird or unconventional, but it's a very famous Australian businessman, very highly regarded, says if you can't put your business model on the back of a beer coaster, don't even talk to me.
And if you only had $1,000 to start a business today, what's the first thing you'd do?
Bring my crypto broker? No. $1,000, geez, $1,000 can get you a lot further than it could, a few years ago, just because of there's some of the freeware you can get on the on site. So that $1,000, I don't think I'd start business with that 1,000. I'd give it to my daughter and get her to open the hot dog van down at the hockey.
And what's one myth about entrepreneurship that needs to be debunked?
That it's easy and that it's for everyone. Yeah,
very true. Last question. What's a daily habit that you've got that gives you a competitive edge?
Look, it's out of necessity. I 11,000 steps a day regardless, and I've just found that pillar or that plank is the start to getting everything else into line. And it's probably something I love me footy and all that sort of stuff, but highly competitive, but just getting that mental health walk that also gets the body moving. I can't do without it.
Yep, and solve a few world problems. On
Exactly, especially with you, Magnus.
Right, thank you very much for your time, Clint. It's been awesome to have you in, mate.
No, excellent. Great to meet you guys too.
Thanks, absolutely.
Excellent stuff.
Thanks,
keep it up.
Cheers, thanks.
Thanks, mate. Legend.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.